30 Odd Minutes is sponsored in part by Digital Dowsing. Who are you powered by?
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities and explore everything from conspiracies to the just plain weird. Welcome to 30 Odd Minutes. If the truth is out there, we will find it. But only by sheer accident.
Hey! Welcome to 30 Odd Minutes. It's great to have you oddballs with us. Here we are aboard the mothership. We've set her down in the Bridgewater Triangle. Look at the swamp there behind us. And we abducted some people. Cadieux and Manny Famolare. How are you guys?
Good. Fantastic.
Good. Shh. We'll get to you soon enough, abductees. Matt, Andrew, how are you?
Not too bad. Had a good weekend.
Yeah, did they put up much of a fight?
Not really.
Oh, nice. Huh.
Tasers work well.
Yeah, they do. They do indeed. All right, well, good to see you guys. Had a good weekend?
Yep.
All right. Don't expand beyond that,
No,
please.
we won't. Got a big show.
Okay. All right. This is a big show. We are talking about the Bridgewater Triangle, a subject near and dear to our heart. Matt, I know you have a summer home there.
Yes.
And Andrew, oddly enough, has a winter home there. So it's they're pretty much always there between the two of them. And when we're talking about the Bridgewater Triangle, Dr. Dreck even weighed in because he had some thoughts on why you should vacation there. Take a look.
If you're looking for the vacation of a lifetime, come to the beautiful Bridgewater Triangle Resort. Yes, spend a day in our swamplands and forests on a walking tour led by our friendly alien tour guide, Nick Snyder. Visit our exclusive wildlife preserve. Stay in our luxury interdimensional hotel, the Bridgewater Inn and Out, and experience the excitement of a hotel that's there one minute and gone the next. And every Wednesday night is our fabulous Swamp Lights display. And don't forget, every guest gets a free puckwudgie in their room. What more could you ask? Don't delay. Come to the Bridgewater Triangle before it comes to you.
Good to have you with us. I'm definitely going to vacation there when I'm not crashing at Matt or Andrew's place. All right, let's get to this. In 1983, cryptozoologist and author Loren Coleman released his best-selling book, Mysterious America. In the book, he first coined the term Bridgewater Triangle to designate a roughly 200-square-mile area of Massachusetts between Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. Coleman discovered many mysterious occurrences inside this triangle, ranging from Bigfoot and Thunderbird sightings, giant serpents, UFOs, ghosts, and other strange phenomena. Since then, interest in this area has only grown. Soon, a brand new documentary will be released called The Bridgewater Triangle, which explores all of these mysteries. Here to give us a sneak peek, please welcome to the mothership filmmakers Cadieux and Manny Famolare.
Yeah!
All right. Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you for having us.
Is this your first time on a spaceship?
It is.
It is.
Which, I mean, and there have been UFO sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle, right?
Very appropriate.
It could have been us. I'm throwing that out there. All right, guys, before we're going to get... They're like, what did we agree to? It's so funny. First the abduction and then this. Wait till we bring out the probe. It'll be a goof. All right, the Bridgewater Triangle movie, I think it's only appropriate. Let's start with the trailer for this, and then we'll talk about it. Take a look.
I've been studying cryptozoology for 52 years. I started picking up on this whole notion that there was an area that was a magnet of weird phenomena. I think that we've got something very unique going on in the Bridgewater-Hockomock area that we should at least acknowledge.
Whatever it is, we keep talking about this region for some reason.
I certainly think that the Hockomock Swamp serves as the epicenter of activity in the Bridgewater Triangle.
I saw something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
I saw what appeared to be the Sasquatch creature that I heard about.
Off in the distance was an extremely large, man-like creature.
I pulled over the Rainham Dog Track parking lot. I'm right under this orb as it's birthing these ships.
what I seen was definitely not from this world.
A lot of criminal cult activity happened in the Freetown State Forest.
We had evidence that rituals taking place in the state forest. Then there was a huge amount of calves with the absence of blood.
Legends and stories about the Bridgewater Triangle will never stop. Nobody can argue that there isn't something very special about this area.
I don't believe in the Bridgewater Triangle. I accept it.
So guys, kind of spooky. What isn't happening in the Bridgewater Triangle? Let's start with, where is this place? We mentioned the towns, but can you give us a sense of where in Massachusetts are we talking about?
We're talking about southeastern Massachusetts.
Okay.
With the top being Abington.
Right.
And then Freetown, and then Rehoboth. So it roughly covers about 200 square miles.
Right, and there's a closer look at the map just to give you an idea. There's
right.
The Hockomock Swamp. There's major roads running through there. This is not some remote place necessarily. Right. This is a place where people live.
Yeah, it's not like the Bermuda Triangle or the Bennington Triangle up in Vermont, which is a lot more sparsely populated.
Right. Now, I know, Aaron, this started for you as a student film project many years ago, right?
Yeah, I first did a documentary in 2003 while at Fitchburg State College, and it was more or less just a practice film. I never intended for it to be anything more than that, but it kind of developed a cult following, and before I knew it, I had phone calls on a weekly basis of people asking me for copies.
And it's so interesting because, okay, first of all, like the Bermuda Triangle, right? Mm-hmm. There are plenty of airplanes and boats that go through and don't disappear. There's plenty of normal stuff that happens in the Bridgewater Triangle. What was Coleman thinking? What was his rationale for designating this area? Not an area smaller or larger, but this one.
I think it was more or less just him plotting on a map the different reports he was getting from southeastern Mass. I mean, he had moved from California to the Boston area, right. And he kept getting reports specifically from southeastern Massachusetts, more so than any other part of Massachusetts. So he kind of focused on that area and plotted the points on the map and came up roughly with a triangle, which at the time the Bermuda Triangle was very popular.
Sure.
So he kind of was playing off of that, I think.
Sure, no, of course. That makes perfect sense. But I mean, what kind of sightings have been reported in here? I mean, we mentioned briefly some of the things, but I mean...
There's everything from UFOs, Bigfoot sightings, Thunderbird sightings,
right.
Houses that allegedly are haunted, planes disappearing, birds disappearing. It seems like a little bit of everything, really.
And a little bit of true crime, which people tie into the Bridgewater Triangle. So a lot of that, especially down in the Freetown State Forest area.
Yeah, it's a mix of everything, really.
Right, the Freetown State Forest, cult activity. I know there's been a history of that as well. Matt and Andrew, you guys are no stranger to this area as well. First of all, in the interest, I guess, of full disclosure, we're all in this documentary at some point. So I guess this is payback. But I mean, it's a subject that if you study weird things in Massachusetts, the name comes up again and again. What about you guys? When did you first hear about strange goings-on in that area?
I'll let Andrew take it first.
The first things I heard about were the Hockomock.
Right.
Before I even heard of the term Bridgewater Triangle, and then kind of caught up to the fact that Loren Coleman had already been investigating the area, completely. But as a ghost hunter, I became most interested with the town of Rehoboth, because Rehoboth just seems to have one great ghost story after another with current witnesses to these hauntings.
Right. And Rehoboth, one of my favorite all-time Massachusetts ghost stories, Route 44, the red-headed hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Which is... give us a quick recap of the... I mean, there's so many variations. Give us the generic, Manny or Aaron, why don't you tell us what the...
Start and...
Yeah.
Well, the story with the red-headed hitchhiker is... it carries from one person to another. It keeps changing, but the most common story is the Seekonk Rehoboth line, is that people see him, and he's described as having a big red thick beard and curly red hair, and wearing a plaid shirt, kind of looking like an old farmer. And he's known to appear in cars. He's known to appear, if there's 3 people in the car, he'll appear in the 4th seat. He's known to be hit and driven through. And other times he's known to manipulate radios and so on. But it seems like there's a consistency in stories with a lot of people that you talk to. They'll tell you something different, or I think the best stories come from the people that have never heard of them, that will tell you that they were driving down 44 and they seen something, and then you ask, well, have you ever heard of this? And they say, no, what's that? Well, can you describe him for me? And then they say, well, yeah, he had a red beard, he had a plaid shirt. And you're like, oh, have you ever heard of the Bridgewater Triangle? And they're like, no, what's that?
Yeah.
Those are the stories that are good, that makes you wonder if there really is something out there.
Were you able to find any first-hand accounts of Red-Headed Hitchhiker?
No first-hand accounts of Red-Headed Hitchhiker. There are a series of first-hand accounts of other phenomena in the film, and a lot of them, but specifically on that one, no.
And what's so interesting to me about that, when I wrote a book called Weird Massachusetts, and I wrote about it because it's such a great story. You can't not, it demands your attention. And I, too, didn't find any first-hand accounts. I did after the book came out. Someone contacted me. And just when I was ready to go interview him, just suddenly got shy. Told me over the phone.
Spooked.
Told me his story over the phone, and I remember thinking, like, wow, this is great. Finally, a first-hand account. And I had another guy contact me who said, I saw the hitchhiker, and I said, wow, really? And he described everything. I was working second shift, coming home, guy with a plaid shirt, screeched to a halt. And then I said, wow, this was on Route 44. He said, no, actually, it was in Ashland, which is like an hour from there, Ashland, Massachusetts. And I went, oh. That's not the same story. And all he said was, well, maybe he finally got a ride. Which is pretty funny. But that story comes up again and again, and it goes back a ways tame. Like that's the thing. It's not just a few years. I mean, it goes back decades.
And it does. And it was featured a lot in what was that book called? Charles Robinson's book, New England Ghost Files. There's a whole chapter on that in New England Ghost Files as well.
Right. No. Absolutely. Matt, do you ever pick up the hitchhiker?
No, but I have talked to first-hand witnesses. I talked to a couple of Rehoboth cops that have dealt with him and dealt with people that have dealt with him.
That's you got to love the police, right? They're often the first called, And
they're a great source for information.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Absolutely. So we've got ghost stories, we've got UFO sightings, the Hockomock Swamp. Actually, let's Eric in the engine room, if we could just play that. We're going to play a scene from the Hockomock Swamp, and then let's talk a little bit more about it. Take a look.
In addition to Joseph DeAndrade, deceased West Bridgewater resident John Baker reported his own Bigfoot sighting while fur trapping in the Hockomock Swamp in the early 1980s. A Boston Herald article featured an interview with Baker concerning his encounter. The following are direct quotes from Baker, read by the article's author, Ed Hayward.
Something was following me, and I knew it was big. So I took the boat down a small creek to a dry hill, and it kept moving. I knew it wasn't a human because when it passed by me, I could smell it. It smelled like skunk, musty and dirty, like it lived in the dirt. My heart was up in my throat. To this day, I don't know what it was, but I know I saw it, and it was out there.
So the Hockomock Swamp, this is going back to Wampanoag days. This is going back, centuries. First of all, it's the largest wetland in New England, or at least in Massachusetts, right?
It's either the first or it might be the second largest wetland in New England.
Yeah, but it's huge, right? And,
absolutely.
And we've all been in there. There's places where, especially you can imagine being in there in, say, wintertime, where you step through ice. It could be a foot deep. It could be 10 feet deep. It could be any number of situations in there. And what does the name even mean, Hockomock?
In the Algonquin language, it's said to mean place where spirits dwell. There's a few different translations that have come through the years, but that seems to be the most accurate.
And we've also heard what Devil's Swamp.
Devil's Swamp.
Devil's Swamp.
I think it's a little too simplistic. I think place where spirits dwell is a little more appropriate.
Sure. And then what happened years ago is Massachusetts, in its wisdom, decided to put highways through this great wetland, 495 and
138
and 138,
24
right?
runs.
And 24 runs through it too. So they've carved up this wetland, and there's places too you can still go in, you can hike it, but there are places so dense you just can't even get through. And you can imagine some of these stories that come out of there, especially trappers, hunters, and people that are going through. So many. Did you find people were coming forward to you guys once they heard what you were doing and said, "Hey, listen, I got a story you have to hear"?
It seems like a lot of people had stories.
Yeah, and
from there.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's
one
fine.
thing about this film is the stories of the Bridgewater Triangle are so vast and there's so many of them. It is impossible to cover everything. We did the best that we could. We did an 1.5 hour long feature, and we're pretty in depth. But to cover every story that's ever come out of the Bridgewater Triangle would require like a 60-hour documentary.
Oh, of course.
At least.
Tickets would be more than $10.
Right. Yeah. Right. How do people? What do people think that live there? Are they anyone concerned? Like, oh my God, I live in the Bridgewater Triangle. What do the residents think?
I think the residents that have lived there the longest are the ones that they've never heard of the Bridgewater Triangle, but they've heard of the weird stories.
Okay.
So
especially the ones that live around the Hockomock Swamp.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I'd like to put into perspective is a lot of people that are not from this area think that the Hockomock Swamp is the Bridgewater Triangle. And I know you had that other map that you show that shows where it's located in the triangle. The triangle is 200 square miles, so the Hockomock Swamp is only a portion of it. So that just clears up some misconceptions from people that are not from this area. They think the whole thing is the Hockomock Swamp.
Sure, Eric, if you could bring up image 3, the close map, you can see in that dark green area, right near the top. Up at the top, that's the Hockomock Swamp. So yeah, that's not even, that's maybe 15% of it or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that gives us a good idea. And that also shows the major roads running through the area that we're talking about. And it goes all the way over to, down to Dighton Rock, and there's all kinds of oddities right in that ballpark. And I know Chris Balzano, who you had in the documentary as well, I once saw him give a lecture, expanding the Bridgewater Triangle. If you went down to Fall River, you've got the Lizzie Borden House, which is a little bit out of that range, but not far out, and I think you guys joked when I saw you this past weekend that it really should be a big circle, right? It's not necessarily a triangle.
Well, yeah, there is a section of the film that even talks about the boundaries of the triangle, and something of paranormal in nature, you wouldn't think of adhering to town lines and strict borders.
Sure, of course.
It's kind of a loose guide. Chris Pittman actually put it very well in the film, and really uses the Bridgewater Triangle as more of a reference point for a hot spot, but not strictly within those borders.
Yeah. All right. Guys, we have to take a break for the news, and it's very creepy, so put your seatbelts on. And then when we come back, I want to hear more about just the making of the documentary and reactions so far to some of the stories. We'll be back right after the news.
The streets of Northampton, England, have recently become the stage for a mysterious clown who has been leaving many people feeling unamused. The clown's first known appearance was on the night of Friday, September 13, 2013. Looking very much like Stephen King's evil clown, Pennywise, this guerrilla street performer shows up at night standing along roads and on street corners, doing little more than waving and smiling at those who see him. The Northampton Herald and Post reported that this spooky character once knocked on a resident's front door and asked them if they would like to have their windowsills painted. Besides the fact that the stranger was dressed like a clown, the homeowner also noticed he didn't have any painting tools. This clown has been seen at times clutching a bunch of bright balloons or holding a teddy bear while he waves at people passing by in a weird and unsettling way. This creepy game of Spot the Clown has its own Facebook page called Spot Northampton's Clown. And despite having 171,000 likes, there are many in Northampton who want this guy to go away, reminding him that there are folks out there who are truly frightened by clowns, especially children. Whereas the rest of us simply hate clowns with a passion and would like to hunt them down to extinction if we could. I'm Andrew Lake, and oddly enough, that's the news.
That's the most frightening news we've ever played. Andrew, don't do that anymore.
Enough people in the chat room saying how much they hate clowns.
Who does? Seriously? I've got a daughter, and Andrew was joking with her before the show, saying, if you saw a clown, you know to run, right? She knows to run. All right, the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, which is going to be out very soon. We'll have links to your website, of course. And it is, what is it, the BridgewaterTriangleDocumentary.com?
That's correct.
That's a lot of words, but...
it's easy to remember, though.
It's easy to remember. We'll have links to you guys. Matt, you've had an experience in this area. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I was up in the Sonnet Ledge. I was brought up there by a couple of locals to go basically UFO watching, because at that particular time I was doing a lot of work on UFOs and stuff like that, and drove up to the top of the ledge. They were unloading gear out of the car, and they said, the ledge is right there through that path. So I walked through the path, and which was probably about 25 at the most yards away, to the clearing. I looked out at the precipice that drops down about 80 feet, if not more, and I saw this woman in a white dress, muslin-type dress, just standing there. So I turned back to my friends and said, hey, we're not alone out here. Turned back, the woman was gone. The only way she could really get by would be right by me through the path or straight down.
Wow.
So I went running to the edge and looked down and nobody there. And the two locals started laughing at me and they said, oh, you just saw the lady of the ledge. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's a ghost. So they're looking for UFOs and I run into a ghost.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's well, we should go there some night looking for the ghost. Maybe we'll
see a UFO.
Oh, that makes sense. No, it's so interesting with legends. You go looking for one and sometimes you find something you didn't count on. And this, of course, is in the Freetown State Forest.
Correct.
And we've got a clip to play from that. Let's take a look at that scene.
Although satanic-related crimes and activity often dominate headlines relating to the Freetown State Forest, the area has also been associated with a number of isolated crimes, odd occurrences, and paranormal activity. In 1978, the remains of 15-year-old Raynham resident Mary Lou Arruda were found tied to a tree in the forest.
Mary Lou Arruda was on her bicycle on a dirt road in Raynham, and she was knocked off her bike and kidnapped, brought to the state forest in Freetown, and subsequently murdered. Her body was found 2 months later in November of '78 by two dirt bike riders. I said, we found a headless body tied to a tree. It was like a week after Halloween, so I figured it must be a dummy. And they brought me to the area. They wouldn't go near it. They pointed up there, and I walked up the hill, and sure enough, it was a headless body of a female tied to the tree.
Eventually, 32-year-old James Cater was tried and convicted of the kidnapping and murder. The death of Mary Lou Arruda is often confused with crimes committed by the Fall River satanic cult.
Although the James Cater case, Mary Lou Arruda case had absolutely nothing to do with a satanic crime, unfortunately her body was found near some of that activity.
His defense attorney basically put forth the theory that a cult had killed Arruda and not him. This kind of led to an attaching that he was perhaps involved with a cult, and that's what happened.
I had to testify in that case and say, in my opinion, had nothing to do with that. He appealed it several times, got 3 or 4 trials, but he's still doing life in prison for that crime.
Bad stuff is happening here. I mean, cult activity, murders, kidnapping. But it begs the question, the same question people beg of the Bermuda Triangle. If you look at any area, 200 square miles where there's people, and you look for all the bad stuff, will you find it? Is there more in this 200 square miles than, say, Western Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island?
I wouldn't necessarily say there's more in the 200 square miles in the Bridgewater Triangle, but the Freetown State Forest in particular seems to be a magnet for criminal activity.
Right, and it's remote. I think I heard it described once. It's kind of a halfway point between Providence and Boston. If you had mob activity in either city, it's a pretty good place to. I know that's where we dump all our bodies.
Yeah.
I mean it's our go-to. So it makes sense for others as well. We should edit that out.
Yeah.
All right. Too bad we're live. All right. No, understood. Okay. So let's talk about some of the other paranormal sightings. In the whole area, UFO sightings are so difficult. I mean, we've got. This is the eastern seaboard. There's all kinds of activity in the sky. How far back do the UFO sightings go in regard to this area?
The most common one that people know about is the one that happened in 1760, which is the Spear of Fire. The only documentation that I can find on that was from an astrology website, and it did actually say a Spear of Fire was across Boston, and then it just exploded in the sky. As far as beyond that goes, I think that there are some, but I think
there was one in 1908 by 2 undertakers on Halloween night, which is kind of appropriate.
Nice.
That's a popular one.
And the most famous one, though, probably besides the 1760, is the 2 news reporters from WHDH saw a home plate-shaped object flying low in the sky, and that was in the spring of 1979, and there was a whole series of reports of that same craft in this area at that time.
It ended up making the front page of the Brockton Enterprise as well.
Right.
And there was even a illustration of what they saw on the front page.
So now you guys get to go out into this area. You interviewed people out in the swamp and all throughout the triangle. Have you had any experiences while you guys were in there?
I would say there was one incident that happened while interviewing Chris Balzano in regards to Anawan Rock that was interesting. Okay. I won't say too much more than that. I want to save it for the film, but it was a very interesting course of events.
Anawan Rock, of course, where the King Philip's War ended. Well, the surrender, anyway. It's the if not for that sign on the side of the road, it would just be a rock lost in the woods. And if not for a story. But I know, Andrew, you've had experiences at Anawan Rock.
Yeah, with Matt. We had a very interesting night only a couple of nights after the anniversary. And on a very warm August night, Matt and I were standing back to back with only maybe a foot and a half between the two of us. And we both spun around and locked eyes. And he had the same shocked look in his face that I probably did, because we felt something walk right in between us. And the hair, the goose flesh, just all over us at the same time. Plus, we saw what others have talked about. We saw that weird campfire light flickering in amongst the trees and the bushes out in the swamp, and we could find no logical explanation for it.
Yeah, I saw the light, and I'm like, wait a minute. There's no fire down there. What's that doing under there? So I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, turn around, look out there, tell me what you see. He turned around, didn't say anything until he looked up, and he was like, fire.
Yeah,
firelight.
Because anyone who's ever had a campfire out in the woods, and you look up, you see that golden reflective light on the underside of the trees, and it would be there, and then it would go away, and then it would be back, and go away, and be back, and there were no cars on the road. There was no other light. It just didn't make any sense.
Several other items happened throughout that night. It was just wild.
It was just a very strange place.
If I could just jump in real quick here. There is a lot of Native American legend and folklore tied in with the Bridgewater Triangle, especially with King Philip's War. And a lot of paranormal researchers cite King Philip's War as the event which possibly sparked negative energy in the Bridgewater Triangle region. So I just thought that's kind of an important aspect to the film as well.
Yeah, and the King Philip's War is one of those things that if you called someone in Kansas who's never been to the East Coast and asked them, I bet they haven't heard of the King Philip's War. There are people in Connecticut and New York that haven't heard of it.
Bloodiest war on a per capita basis in this country's history.
Right. And those things, the thing is, that history gets lost. And if not for some of these stories, even if they're ghost stories or monster stories or whatever, that force you to go back and say, well, why would the monster be here? Why would the bad ghost be here? And ask those historic questions. That history just continues to just drift away and be gone forever. And I'm curious too, as storytellers, documentarians, that's your job, right? Is to tell the story of this thing. What drew you to this subject? I guess first as a student, and then you already mentioned why you had to come back to it because of all the interest. But what drew you in first?
Well, I love Halloween. It's my absolute favorite holiday, and I'm always looking for spooky topics. And I was researching Spidergate Cemetery and somehow wound up on Chris Pittman's website talking about the Bridgewater Triangle.
Right.
I thought it'd be a great topic for a documentary because it was local, so it was accessible, and there was a lot of interesting things featured in it. So.
Yeah. What about you, Manny?
I heard about it as a kid. I was into the TV show Unsolved Mysteries.
Sure.
Robert Stack's voice went right through me.
Yeah.
And we had a family friend that was telling me that she had heard about birds disappearing over Lake Nipponicket. Mm-hmm. So I remember saying, oh, wow, this is interesting, And I remember going to the library in Bridgewater, and then the librarian had pulled out this folder, and in it was all these Joseph DeAndre articles on Bigfoot, and I said, this is going to be something that, I'm going to fall into. I want to learn more about it.
And here's what's going to happen. Your documentary is going to come out, and you're going to just get flooded with stories that are going to kill you. That you're like, why didn't I hear this before? And there'll be a volume 2 and a volume 3 and a volume 4, and because that's just what happens when people come out of the woodwork. And there's something in sharing the story too. I'm sure you found that with some of these witnesses, getting it off their chest. Just sharing the tale with someone like, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. Did you find that was kind of a healing thing for some people?
Yeah, one gentleman in particular, and it's probably the most intriguing story in the film. And that's the one that people are going to walk away from remembering. And it involves a creature sighting near the Hockomock Swamp.
Very cool, very cool. Well, it's called the Bridgewater Triangle Documentary. You can see it at the BridgewaterTriangleDocumentary.com. We'll have links to you guys from our site. It premieres in October, and we'll have more information on the dates and stuff like that. And then you'll be able to get the DVD after that. So congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Thank you for showing the clips. We loved it. And until next time, folks, stay odd. Bye.